Oh, finally it's over. It felt so long. Let's just go home. Now that Samuel, Daniel, and Kingston are gone, I don't have to take care of you anymore, right? Right after her son Kingston's funeral, my daughter-in-law Elise blurted out these unbelievable words. What was she thinking when she said something like that? In the midst of mourning their father, how could she say such a thing to the twins Samuel and Daniel? You are the only parent these kids have left. Think carefully about what you're doing. Huh? I'm going to remarry a handsome doctor. The old woman can raise the twins. See you. While I was still in shock, Elise said those selfish words and briskly walked away. Both the attendees and I were dumbfounded by the sudden turn of events. Fine. After Elise left, I quietly muttered, I'll take responsibility for Samuel and Daniel. After the chaotic funeral, I finally got home and sank into bed with a deep sigh. I had never felt a day so long and exhausting. My eyes closed naturally. He 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 he. He 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 he. At 2 a.m., I was awakened by eerie laughter coming from the next room. I opened the door to see two faces illuminated by the pale light of the computer screen in the darkness. There were Samuel and Daniel, who should have been mourning, laughing at something on the computer. I am Miranda. Since I lost my beloved husband 3 years ago, I have been living alone in this house. The only joy in my life now is when my adorable grandchildren come to visit me. Today is a special day because my grandsons Samuel and Daniel are coming over to play, so I have been restless since morning. Even after finishing preparing lunch, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing and kept walking around the house. Oh. The camera. The grandkids, who had just started elementary school recently, said they would show me their new uniforms. To capture their shining moments, I started rummaging around for the camera. Found it. Now I'm all set. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, I heard the sound of a car engine stopping in front of the house. Grandma. Hello. I heard cheerful voices coming from the entrance. Yes, welcome. As I ran to the entrance, I saw Samuel and Daniel standing there with brand new backpacks and spotless uniforms. Behind them were my son Kingston and my daughter-in-law Elise. Mom, we're back. Hi Miranda, it's been a while. Good to see you. Come on in. I welcomed Kingston and his family and started the photo session of them in their uniforms. Seeing my grandkids with backpacks that were almost bigger than them made my heart swell with affection. It was hard to tell whether they were carrying the backpacks or the backpacks were carrying them. Grandma, guess what? Daniel and I are in different classes. I have a male teacher and Samuel has a female teacher. Yes, my grandkids are twins. When my only son Kingston married Elise 8 years ago and told us they were having twins, I was thrilled to suddenly have 2 grandkids. However, when Kingston first told me about Elise, I was honestly surprised. Kingston, being gentle and serious, had always been quiet and reserved during his school years, so I never imagined he would choose someone as striking and poised as a model. Thanks to that, the twins were born with clear and attractive features. They might be considered quite good-looking. Elise seemed keen to take advantage of their looks, enrolling Samuel and Daniel in dance schools and having them audition, doing everything she could to get them into the entertainment industry. When they first started kindergarten, Samuel and Daniel didn't understand much and just went along with the dance classes and auditions they were taken to. While wondering how they were doing these days, I was in the kitchen preparing a meal with Kingston. When Elise went to the car to get something she had forgotten, Kingston started speaking secretly. Mom, actually. It seemed to be about Samuel and Daniel. When they just started elementary school, they strongly resisted and said they didn't want to dance or be on TV anymore. For a while, their relationship with Elise wasn't good. Apparently, when Samuel and Daniel started elementary school, they clearly expressed their opinions to Kingston and Elise. It seems that, like Kingston, both of them were not comfortable with being in the spotlight. Elise wanted them to continue somehow, but thinking about Samuel and Daniel, she decided to stop everything. Thanks to that, we almost had a tense atmosphere between us. Now, it's fine though. Just when I was worried about their recent situation and couldn't ask, Kingston confided in me so that Elise and the grandchildren wouldn't hear. Now, they seem to be working hard to get used to school life. While hearing a lot about school from Samuel and Daniel, we all gathered around the dining table. I was worried about their reserved personalities, but I was relieved to see that they were enjoying school. After talking for a while and filling our stomachs, seeing Samuel and Daniel leave with big smiles made me feel happy. Then, a few months later, my son's family of 4 came to visit us again. What have Samuel and Daniel been able to do recently? I was able to animate a picture I drew on the computer the other day. I'm learning C language. Sorry, I asked, but Grandma didn't understand at all. But it sounds like you're able to do amazing things. Recently, both of them are more into using computers than sports. I am not at all knowledgeable about computers. However, from what I hear from Kingston, Samuel and Daniel's computer skills are far ahead of their peers. Kingston and I both believe that they have talent with computers and have high hopes for their future. Kingston is even looking into nearby programming classes. Compared to those boring, plain computers, being on TV would definitely make them famous and earn more money. Elise didn't seem to think much of their interest in computers. Maybe she still hadn't given up on getting them into show business. Why not let the kids do what they like? Kingston said, calming Elise. I believe the greatest happiness is for my grandchildren to do what they love and grow up free and peacefully. I thought while nodding. Time passed, and Samuel and Daniel became 6th graders. They were still deeply immersed in their beloved computers and had completed all the lessons in the programming class a few years ago, graduating from the class. Recently, Kingston has been on business trips often, leaving home frequently. Because of Elise's work schedule, Samuel and Daniel often come to my house to play. Dad's never home, so it's boring because we can't go out. He promised to take us camping next holiday, but will he really take us? Dad is busy with work. He must be holding back from wanting to play with Samuel and Daniel, so let's support him. Samuel and Daniel seem a bit dissatisfied that they don't get to spend much time together because of Kingston's busy work schedule. Kingston had previously talked excitedly about being entrusted with a major project that the company was staking its future on. That project is finally starting, and he is working hard with his colleagues. That being said, recently, not only during the day but also overnight, I've been looking after Samuel and Daniel. At first, I welcomed them gladly, thinking it would be a nice break for Elise, who is juggling work and raising kids mostly by herself. However, now Elise is staying out every time Kingston is on a business trip. I love spending time with my grandkids more than anything, but it feels like it's happening quite often. Even though they are 6th graders and shouldn't require that much attention, I wonder if Elise finds it challenging. Miranda, I'm sorry, but can you take care of them today as well? Elise quickly left after dropping them off. Samuel and Daniel were staying over again today. Oh no. I forgot my cold medicine. So you're feeling a bit under the weather, huh? That's a problem. Elise just left, so let's call her and ask her to bring it. I dialed Elise's number. It rang several times, but she didn't pick up. Finally, the automated voice said, The number you have dialed is either turned off or out of the service area. Elise didn't answer the phone. Elise didn't answer. What should we do about your medicine? I hope you don't get worse. Oh, Mom, she turns off her phone for important meetings. Samuel's words made me question. What? So during important meetings, you can't reach her at all? Yeah, whenever we call, it doesn't go through. But my cold isn't that bad, Grandma. I'll be fine. Compared to my worry, the kids seemed unfazed. Even if she has important meetings, what would happen if there was an emergency involving the kids? They've been safe so far, but isn't this bordering on neglect? I felt sorry for Samuel and Daniel, who seemed neglected by their mom, and a bit of resentment began to grow. The next evening, when Elise came to pick them up, I asked her, Elise, Daniel forgot his medicine, so I called you shortly after you left, but was it difficult to answer the phone? Oh, sorry about that. I turned off my phone, didn't the kids tell you? Elise replied nonchalantly, as if it was the most natural thing. I see, but there might be emergencies, so maybe you should keep your phone on. I didn't have the energy to scold Elise any further and didn't say anything more. Even after that, Samuel and Daniel came to stay a few more times. Every time I had a reason to call Elise, she never answered. One afternoon, I got a call. An unknown number. I hesitantly answered, and an anxious male voice spoke. Hello, is this Kingston's mother? I'm his colleague. Sorry to call suddenly, but please stay calm. Kingston is in the hospital. It took me a moment to process what I was hearing. Panic surged through me. I got the hospital's location from his colleague and quickly called a taxi. On the way, I couldn't calm down, worrying about Kingston's condition. What could have happened to Kingston to land him in the hospital? Is he going to be okay? Maybe Elise knows something. I tried calling Elise, hoping she would answer, but all I got was the long ringing tone. Then the automated message. The number you have dialed is. Why can't I reach Elise at a time like this? I keep calling her over and over, praying she'll pick up, but the result is always the same. All the way to the hospital, I tried to get in touch with her, but she never answered. When I arrived at the hospital, a teary-eyed colleague greeted me and explained the situation. Kingston had suddenly collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. They provided the necessary treatment, but his condition was critical, and he still hadn't regained consciousness. I called his wife, but she didn't answer any of my calls. So, I contacted you, Mrs. Scott. Thank you for coming so quickly. Elise hadn't answered the phone after all. It seems Kingston had been suffering from insomnia lately and looked unwell, and his coworkers had been worried about him. Had he been working so hard that he couldn't sleep, or had he been pushing himself too much? I regretted Kingston's earnest nature. I decided I needed to inform Elise of the situation and headed to Kingston's house. Worried about Kingston's condition, I reluctantly left the hospital. When I arrived at Kingston's house, I found Samuel and Daniel home from school and waiting alone. Grandma, what's going on? You're home already. Hasn't Elise come back yet? No, not yet. Are you going to wait here? I wondered how I should tell Samuel and Daniel about Kingston. Was it even my place to say anything? I decided to wait until Elise came back so I could explain everything to all three of them together. After a while, Elise came home. Elise! Have you checked your mobile phone? I've been calling you a lot. Elise rummaged through her bag and took out her mobile phone. Miranda, what's going on all of a sudden? Oh, you're right. I have a lot of missed calls. Did something happen? Feeling frustrated by Elise's attitude, I took a deep breath and began to speak. Elise, Samuel, Daniel, please listen calmly. Kingston collapsed at work today and is now in the hospital. The doctors have done everything they can, but he still hasn't regained consciousness. Samuel and Daniel seemed frozen with shock, their faces filled with confusion. Meanwhile, Elise just said, "What?" without any change in her expression, still fiddling with her mobile phone. I had expected her to be more shocked and worried, but her reaction was completely different from what I had imagined, and I was taken aback. My bewilderment was lost on Elise, who was engrossed in her mobile phone. And so, the days went by. My prayers for Kingston to wake up went unanswered, and he never regained consciousness. The doctor told us there was no hope of him waking up, and we had to prepare for the worst. A few days later, Kingston's funeral was held. Samuel and Daniel were silent, their heads down, crying the entire time. Even though they're trying to be strong, they're still only in 6th grade. Having lost their beloved dad, they must be drowning in grief. All I could do was stay close to them and gently rub their backs. Elise, on the other hand, seemed completely indifferent to the boys' feelings, sitting with a weary look and offering curt nods to the attendees. Many of Kingston's colleagues, subordinates, and even superiors attended the funeral. Everyone was mourning Kingston's loss, some looking utterly devastated, others openly weeping. Seeing how much my son meant to his company filled my heart with pride. But there was something strange. After the wake yesterday, I overheard some coworkers talking as they left, and what they said bothered me. Just when the project was finally on track and things were settling down, why did he have to go so suddenly? He hadn't had any overtime lately, but he did look really worn out. He said he couldn't sleep. What was bothering him so much? This conversation stuck in my mind, and it kept circling around in my head. I thought it was because of overwork and stress from his busy job. But the people at his company didn't say anything like that. In fact, it seemed like work was pretty calm, and they were worried about Kingston's recent behavior. If he was troubled to the point of insomnia, there must have been something other than work causing it. With these questions in mind, I reached the end of the funeral. Finally, it's over. It felt so long. Let's get out of here. Samuel, Daniel, and Kingston are all gone, so I don't have to take care of you anymore, right? Elise said this with a sneer as the funeral ended. I couldn't believe she would say something like that with such an expression. What was she thinking when she said those words? To say such a thing to Samuel and Daniel, who were in the middle of mourning their dad, was beyond comprehension. I thought it must be some kind of mistake and asked her again. Elise, what are you suddenly talking about? Having these kids around is just a nuisance. I don't need them. How can you say that? You're the only parent they have left. Think carefully about it. I tried my best to calm Elise down, thinking it was just a moment of confusion. Think about it? This is the best thing that could happen. Now I can live with my darling. Darling? What do you mean, Elise? I'm marrying a handsome doctor. Let the old woman take care of the twins. Bye. As I stood there confused, Elise spat out these selfish lines and briskly walked away. Both I and the other attendees were dumbfounded by the sudden turn of events. Fine. After Elise left, I quietly muttered to myself, I'll take responsibility for Samuel and Daniel. It's better for them to live with me than to grow up feeling abandoned and sad because their mom left them. Besides, how wonderful it is to live with such adorable grandchildren. As I made up my mind, Samuel spoke up. Grandma, can we live with you? Of course you can. Samuel smiled with relief. It's better to be with Grandma than with Mom. Mom's never home anyway. I don't think she cares about us. Daniel's words broke my heart. How dare you let a child say something like this? How could Elise be so indifferent to them? We stopped by Kingston's house, packed up some essentials with Samuel and Daniel, and finally made it home. After dinner, Samuel and Daniel seemed tired and didn't talk much, looking sleepy. They must have been exhausted both physically and emotionally today. Not only did they say goodbye to their dad, but their mom also walked out on them. I wondered if Samuel and Daniel were okay mentally. Both of them seem calm, as if they've accepted the sudden event, but I'm terribly worried about what they're feeling inside. Rather than saying anything more, I guess I'll just have to watch over them for a while. Both of you must be exhausted today. I'll make your beds, so take your time and rest. Once I'm done cleaning up, I'll go to bed early too. While I was doing the chores, Samuel and Daniel were no longer in the living room. They must have taken their showers and gone back to their rooms. I finally got into bed and let out a big sigh. Suddenly, today's events flashed before my eyes like a slideshow of memories. Is Elise really planning to give up the children? It was late at night, but I wanted to confirm my feelings once more, so I called Elise. The number you have dialed. I hoped she would answer, but the familiar automated message played. I haven't felt a day drag on this long in a while. I was utterly exhausted. My eyes naturally started to close. He 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 he. He 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 he. At 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the next room. I thought it might be my imagination, but the laughter continued. Samuel and Daniel were supposed to be sleeping in the next room. Thinking they should be asleep, I decided to quietly check on them. When I opened the door, there were two faces illuminated by the blue glow of a screen in the darkness. Samuel and Daniel, who I thought were asleep, were watching something on the computer and laughing. What are you doing up so late? Oh, Grandma. Did we wake you? Sorry. Yeah, Grandma, come take a look at this. Following their lead, I peeked at the computer screen. Elise? Darling? Whose messages are these? Could it be? Yeah, that's right. These are messages between Mom and her partner. Displayed on the computer screen was a message history between Elise and who seemed to be her partner. Grandma, you probably have the same notifications on your phone right now. So, I went to get my phone and check. Sure enough, there were notifications. When I opened them, I saw the same message history as on the computer screen. How did you do this? Was it you too? Samuel and Daniel answered proudly. Yeah, we did it. By now, everyone in Mom's contacts should have received the images. What? What do you mean? I asked them to explain the situation because I couldn't understand. I think Dad collapsed because of Mom. Apparently, Kingston had been suspicious of Elise, who had been staying out a lot recently. Kingston had been questioning Elise about where she was and what she was doing, but she always brushed him off, which Samuel had overheard. Maybe because we're still kids. Even though Dad was definitely troubled, he didn't say anything to us. Kingston had been worried about Elise's frequent absences and the fact that she always left the kids with me. Sometimes when I was sleeping with Dad, I would wake up to hear him groaning in pain. He probably couldn't sleep well because he was so distressed. Somehow, the kids had sensed Dad's stress and his inability to sleep. But the old men at the funeral kept saying it was because he was overworked. It was definitely Mom's fault. Samuel said this with a bitter expression. You wouldn't believe what a child says, so I couldn't tell you at the funeral that it was Mom's fault. So, I decided to show everyone the evidence after the funeral, and I used Mom's cell phone to program it. No matter how much they pleaded about Dad's collapse, the adults wouldn't believe them. Moreover, whenever they tried to talk about it, Elise would stop them. It was surprising that they would expose it this way, even though they were good with computers. They spoke with such a clear and refreshed expression that it made me feel a sense of admiration. Still, it was curious how they managed to manipulate Elise's cell phone when they weren't home much. So, I asked. Mom is bad with cell phones and computers. So, we did all the settings for her. That's when we memorized all the passwords. We also looked at the messages and found out who Mom was always with. When she was with Darling, she would always turn off her phone. So, we made it so that information would be sent when she turned it off. So now that the pictures are being sent, it means the phone is off. Look, all the evidence we prepared is being sent. I checked the notifications on my cell phone. The kids are going to Grandma's, so I'll be with you, Darling, today and tomorrow too. You Darling is handsome and competent, but my husband on other hand, despite working seriously, his salary is low. It's incomparable. I'll fabricate Kingston's affair, and if I can get a divorce, I'll get plenty of alimony from the divorce court. There was an overwhelming amount of shocking information. As I went through the notifications, there was also talk about Samuel and Daniel. I gave birth to them handsome, thinking they could earn money, but neither wants to enter the entertainment industry, and they don't have the guts to continue. It's really unbelievable. I spent a lot of money on dance lessons and auditions, but it was all wasted. They're so ungrateful. What kind of mom says that? She forced her children to do things for her own ego and then calls them ungrateful. I truly felt sorry for these kids. And Elise, who seemed so poised and composed, was this foul-mouthed and spiteful. I thought her bad language at the funeral was due to high emotions, but this was her true self. Did Kingston know this about her, or was he deceived? I was very shocked to learn about Elise's true nature. Contrary to my shock, Samuel and Daniel seemed somewhat relieved. By now, the relatives and Mom's friends must be shocked. Later, Elise's mom called me. I am truly sorry for what Elise did. I can't apologize enough. She apologized repeatedly, sounding very remorseful. Since it was something that couldn't be undone, I accepted the apology and asked about Elise's condition. According to Elise's mom, after the exposure that day, Elise was cut off by her relatives and friends. Therefore, she doesn't know where Elise is or what she is doing now. I couldn't help but agree that this was the likely outcome. Honestly, there were days when I worried whether it was the right decision to suddenly take in Samuel and Daniel. But I felt relieved that we severed ties early enough before their lives were further disrupted. I believe they can live happily without being involved with Elise. And rumor has it that her affair partner, who was so keen on remarrying, also abandoned her after realizing her rotten nature. But that wasn't all. Because evidence of the affair spread among her friends, one of them identified the affair partner and investigated further. It turned out that the affair partner also had a habit of cheating and was involved with multiple women. Elise was just one of them. Furthermore, the claim of being a doctor was also a lie. In reality, he was just an ordinary employee at a small company. There were many other misdeeds that were uncovered, leading to a great deal of trouble for him. A few days later, I received a call from Kingston's company. They informed me that Kingston's death would be considered a work-related incident, and compensation would be provided. I knew that Kingston's death wasn't caused by his job. The idea of it being labeled as a work-related incident and receiving compensation made me feel extremely guilty. I couldn't just sit and wait to receive the compensation, so I decided to speak to Kingston's supervisor. I apologize for the trouble caused by Kingston's situation. The truth is, Kingston collapsed not because of work, but due to the stress from his daughter-in-law. I explained the whole situation to him. The supervisor looked shocked as he listened. But then his expression turned serious. No matter the reason, we want you to accept the compensation. It's the last acknowledgement we can give to Kingston. Kingston had been close to completing a significant project, which ended up being a huge success. His contributions were immense, and without his efforts, the project wouldn't have succeeded. This project was a turning point for the company's growth, and they were very grateful to Kingston, regretting not being able to express their gratitude directly. I was deeply moved by how highly they valued Kingston. Kingston's hard work and dedication hadn't been in vain. If only I could tell Kingston directly that the project was successful and that the company thrived because of him. But that wasn't possible. Hoping that Kingston would find some peace in heaven, I decided to accept the compensation. The compensation was more than enough to support Samuel and Daniel's education in the coming years. As Kingston had wished during his life, I wanted the two of them to grow up freely and peacefully, pursuing their interests. One day, they would both have dreams of their own. I didn't want them to give up on their dreams just because they were living with me after losing their parents. To provide them with various opportunities when the time came, I planned to save this money carefully. With a strong determination to raise these two boys to be individuals who could contribute to society like Kingston, I made up my mind. From now on, the three of us would cherish Kingston's memory and live happily together. When our son, Mike, suddenly vanished, my husband, Tom, didn't offer me any comfort. Not shedding a single tear at Mike's final farewell. He stared at Mike's portrait, grumbling. "He's always been in my way. Because of him, I had no need for Tom, who glared with such resentment. Clutched in my shaking hands was Mike's suicide note. Now, it's my turn to take revenge on Tom in Mike's place. My name is Mary, a 53-year-old part-time working housewife. Tom and I were high school classmates. Attracted to each other not for standing out but for being just ordinary. After graduation, Tom moved to Boston for college, and I found employment as a secretary at a small local architectural firm. Long-distance relationships don't last. Airfare's too expensive. It's your fault for not going to college, Mary. I was constantly blamed, and as work got busier, it didn't even take us a year to part ways. Why did we end up marrying, you ask? It was because I bumped into Tom again after he graduated and found a job in Boston. I felt secure in Tom's unchanged simplicity. In hindsight, maybe I was just rushing to marry before turning 30. He was still the miserly type, quick to blame others for anything. It was an odd fate that brought us together as husband and wife, but having been blessed with a son and a daughter, I guess it was worth it. Then, a joyful event took place in our household. Our son, Mike, who had just turned 23, brought home a charming young woman. "Mom, I'm bringing someone over this Sunday. It's someone Dad knows." "What?" I was surprised when I got the call. I hadn't expected him to bring his fiancée. That's because Mike has been shy and reserved since he was young, not the type to actively approach women. I always thought Mike was handsome and popular with the ladies. But our daughter Anne, who is 2 years his senior, seemed to have seen through him, blessing Mike's engagement. On the other hand, both Tom and I were anxious that morning. "Mike said on the phone that it's someone you know too, Tom?" "What? What did he say the name was?" Tom asked back awkwardly. "I didn't ask that far. We were to be introduced at the engagement announcement today. I didn't know either. Maybe it's the grocery store cashier Tom always goes to at night, or perhaps someone from his workplace." Thinking lightly of it at that moment might have been a mistake. I was over the moon about Mike bringing a woman home for the first time. If only I had noticed the unease in Tom's darting eyes.
Linda here. Mike and I met through a friend. Pleased to meet you.
Linda. How adorable. Mike's really outdone himself. I replied to Linda's brisk introduction. Between you and me, I secretly thought Mike was too good for her. Mike followed in Tom's footsteps, attending a university in the city, then returning home to work for a food manufacturer. I was disappointed when he decided to rent an apartment close to his workplace. But when he handed me a spare key, asking me to come over and make my favorite dishes, I couldn't have been happier. My Mike always treating me with such care. As a parent, I couldn't help but feel Linda, with her flashy appearance, didn't quite match up to my upstanding son, Mike.
Ah, Linda. I think I remember meeting her at a restaurant we went to for a business dinner.
Tom, scratching the back of his head, seemed to recall meeting her after hearing the introduction. As the sales department manager, Tom often used that restaurant for entertaining clients, and it seems Linda remembered him as a regular. Tom, a man who could be anyone in middle age. I figure Linda probably only remembered him by the title on his business card. So, that's how you knew Dad. Linda's beautiful, isn't she? I always think she's too good for me.
Not at all. I love your face, Mike.
Linda, intertwining her arm with Mike's as she blushed, made me wonder when I raised a son to be so openly affectionate with women. Well, he was never immune to women's charms. Getting married at 23. Mike's decision to marry in his second year of working felt a bit early, but if they were happy, I wholeheartedly wanted to bless their union. I would come to regret not noticing the flames of jealousy in Tom's eyes at that time. 6 months after the wedding went off without a hitch. I thought I could breathe a sigh of relief, only to find myself overwhelmed with chores while still working part-time. Despite initially planning to rent an apartment and live alone, Mike changed his mind during their honeymoon, wishing to live with us.
Does Linda agree with moving in?
Of course.
Linda lost her mom when she was young and wants to learn a lot from you, Mom.
Thank you. I hesitated to welcome Mike and his bride into our 20-year-old home, but it was Mike's wish. I couldn't complain about becoming busier.
I've missed living with you, but feel free to use my room too.
Our daughter, just having graduated from junior college, offered her help for Mike and his new wife by renting an apartment nearby. After discussing with Tom, we remodeled the kitchen, bathroom, and toilet to make them more comfortable for the newlyweds.
Mom, thank you.
It's like brand new. You did all this remodeling for me and Linda. On moving day, Mike, bright-eyed as he carried in boxes, said,
"The new bed is a wedding gift from Tom."
Dad, thank you. It's only natural as a parent. Linda, I hope you like the mattress. Watching Linda bounce happily on the bed, Tom looked on with pleasure.
I'll work to pay back the remodeling costs from now on. Don't be cheeky. I never expected you, with your meager earnings, to pay us back.
Tom was cold to the earnest Mike, despite having smiled at Linda. His long-standing neglect due to work had finally taken its toll. I'm not sure if he wanted to assert his authority as a father, but from that day, Tom's attitude toward Mike became haughty.
Do Mike and Linda have no sense of restraint? Just because it's their day off, they stay in bed all morning.
It's fine. They're newlyweds. They should enjoy their time together, I said with a smile, trying to calm Tom's anger. Perhaps we could have afforded a duplex for Mike if he got married 10 years later. But this was sudden, and we couldn't manage that much. The kitchen, toilet, and bathroom are shared with us, so Tom is irritated by the disruption to our living rhythm. I'll leave Mike and Linda's meals in the fridge. I'm off to my part-time job. It's a busy day on sale days. I hurriedly took off my apron, glancing at the clock. What about lunch?
What?
I had hoped for a simple goodbye. Frustrated by Tom's childish remark, always thinking only of himself.
Your meal is in the fridge too. Mike said they're eating out.
Everyone takes the breadwinner for granted. How can I eat alone? I'm going out for some slot machines to change my mood. Throwing the newspaper on the couch, Tom grabbed his jacket and left the room.
I'm sorry. I just couldn't take the day off.
I wondered if my words reached Tom's back. Even if they didn't, it didn't matter. I had no expectations for Tom, who always felt neglected and suffered from delusions of persecution. Oh, marriage is indeed a test of patience. Mom, long time no see. Dad seemed upset. Did something happen? Startled, I turned to find Anne standing behind me.
Anne. It's just Tom being his usual self. Childish, even at his age.
I hate that about him.
Yes. But we have to appreciate that he's provided for the family for decades, right?
Well, yes. If only he weren't so pompous. I can't stand his sulking.
Right. The portraits you draw of Tom are always so grumpy.
Daughters are indeed a blessing. Talking about old times with Anne, my grievances against Tom seemed to fade away.
I'm glad you're doing well, Anne. I have to head to my part-time job now. I'll be back by evening.
Okay, but I can't wait until then.
I just stopped by to talk to Mike. Oh, I think Mike and Linda are still sleeping upstairs.
Is that so? Mike and Linda always seem so close. And laughed, looking up at the living room ceiling. Her eyes weren't smiling, suggesting she was troubled by something. I wished she had called ahead. I would have liked to prepare her favorite dish. I left for my part-time job, feeling a tug at my heartstrings. That evening, Tom didn't come home. Tom, who only indulged in slots as a casual hobby for no more than an hour, left the lunch I'd stored in the fridge untouched. As dinner time approached without a single message from him, worry began to set in.
Mom, welcome back. You must be tired from your part-time job.
What? I was surprised to be greeted by Mike, whom I thought wasn't home.
Mike, weren't you going out with Linda today?
Yeah, we did go out. Mike gave a weak smile. Since getting married, Mike had always seemed happy, but now there was an uncharacteristic gloom in his expression.
Did you two have a fight? By the way, Anne came by, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. We talked for a bit.
Maybe Anne has found someone special? Thinking about marriage? There are things she can only talk to you about, after all.
The siblings have always been close. Whenever Anne fell and cried, Mike was quick to pick her up and soothe her with a head pat. If there was a contest for brothers comforting their sisters, Mike would win hands down. Our album is filled with such precious memories.
Then, I'll make dinner for you too as well. I bought some fresh meat on sale today. Let's have steak. Mom, thank you. Linda probably won't be back for dinner, so it'll just be the two of us. What?
Mike's comment, as if he knew Linda and Tom wouldn't be returning home, left me pondering. This would be the first dinner just between Mike and me since they moved in.
Mom, it's delicious.
Thank you for always. Mike always expressed his gratitude before eating, warming me to the core. It was more rejuvenating than any luxurious bath bomb. Late that night, Tom came home, humming a tune and in high spirits.
Tom, where have you been all this time? That's none of your business.
His mood was good, but his attitude remained poor. Best not to stir the pot. I took great care not to even mention Tom's disheveled thinning hair. Has Mike gone to bed? Yes, probably. Normally, the question would be about both Mike and Linda, but this time it was just about Mike, which felt odd. For the first time in a while, Mike and I had dinner just the two of us. You know how Mike used to eat so little when he was younger? But tonight, he finished a huge steak. What? Just the two of you indulging? With whose money do you think? There's some saved for you too. It's your fault for not coming home. You always talk back like that. That's the problem. If you were younger and more submissive, I wouldn't have to do things like this. Do things like what? Did he accidentally let something slip? Tom covered his own mouth. Could it be debt? Or embezzlement of company funds? My mind raced to conclusions. Given Tom's high salary for someone in his 50s, and considering his appearance, an illicit affair seemed out of the question. Dad, you're home early. Mike interrupted us, as if to prevent an argument. Mike, don't startle me like that. Dad, we need to talk. Seeing Mike's troubled expression, I thought perhaps Linda wanted to end their cohabitation. I want to hear this too. Sorry, Mom. I want to have a man-to-man talk with him since it is going to be the last time. Told it was a conversation for men, I refrained from pressing further. Tom appeared to be annoyed yet defensively poised. All right, I'll go upstairs. Mike, who had never directly voiced his opinions to Tom, might have felt that becoming a working adult put him on equal footing. But he said, since it is going to be the last time, right? An ominous atmosphere. I watched their backs as they ascended the stairs, filled with a restless anxiety. I don't know what Mike and Tom talked about that day. All I know is that Tom came down from the upstairs looking pale. I pretended to sleep, fearing that asking would only worsen his mood. The next morning's atmosphere was like that of a funeral. Tom, Mike, and Linda were all silent, feeling the air too tense to inquire about their return. Linda, good morning. Did you and Mike have a fight yesterday? I asked cheerfully. Don't ask unnecessary questions. Tom snapped at me, defending the silent Linda. Mom, I'm sorry. What? Why are you apologizing? Like I said, Mike, don't be saying things that aren't necessary. Faced with Tom's yelling whenever I spoke, I went out to hang the laundry. Little did I know that these would be Mike's last words to me. By that evening, Mike was gone. Mike, why? How could this? I was informed by the police and rushed to the hospital where Mike was being kept. Feeling like I was in a dream. It felt like watching a TV drama. I couldn't stop shaking the entire taxi ride. I tried calling Tom and Linda's smartphones several times on my way to the hospital, but couldn't get through to either. When I called Tom's company, I was told he had taken 3 days of paid leave. The news was shocking, and I felt a mix of anger, panic, and nausea. Mom, why? What happened to Mike? And was already at the hospital when I arrived. Seeing me, she ran over with tears in her eyes. I don't understand what's going on. I can't reach Tom or Linda. Unforgivable. What? I hugged and who was trembling with rage, as we braced ourselves so we wouldn't faint and faced the changed Mike. We did everything we could. I'm sorry. According to the doctor, Mike had suddenly darted into the street and was hit by a car that couldn't avoid him. The driver was still being questioned by the police, but it was suggested that Mike might have run out to save a kitten on the road. There's not a single scratch on his face. Mike! Mike! And I cried out, our voices filling the room, desperately praying it was all just a dream. After confirming it was Mike, there was no time to grieve. I was swamped with hospital paperwork, arranging the funeral, and contacting Mike's employer. I called Linda and Tom hundreds of times throughout the day, but their smartphones were unreachable. I nearly fainted several times. With the help of Anne and my parents, I somehow managed to make it through the funeral arrangements.
What the hell is he doing?
My father's anger finally erupted. Linda's father, who should have been the chief mourner, was also desperately looking for Linda but lamented that he couldn't reach her.
When I called his company, they said he'd taken 3 days of paid leave. Maybe he's blocking my calls because he recognizes my number.
In a time like this, who goes off to play? Fine. I'll call him. With that, my father called Tom. It seems Tom couldn't ignore the call from my father. My father's raised voice filled the room.
Listen! You better come back by tomorrow.
Apparently, Tom had flown to Anchorage. And Linda was with him.
I wasn't informed about any trip they were planning together.
Was he lonely eating lunch by himself? Is it because I enjoyed dinner with Mike? To spite me? Such a juvenile act, going on a trip with Linda as some form of harassment. I was too dumbfounded to say anything, just cursing Mike's luck on the day of the accident. On the day of the funeral, a sullen Linda and Tom showed up.
It's all his fault. Because of him, I'm miserable.
He took everything from me.
I was just taking back what's mine.
Tom glared at Mike's portrait.
Linda and I were about to eat something delicious together. How could you even call yourself a father?
My father was furious at Tom's absurd remark. Seeing his intensity, Linda hid behind Tom. In that moment, I felt as if the reason for my unease all this time became clear. Shouldn't a wife be rushing to Mike, crying out in grief? Why is she seeking comfort from Tom, of all people, despite their closeness?
Linda, it's okay.
What? Though everyone was puzzled about what was okay, the funeral began, and they both started crying into their handkerchiefs.
Mike, why did you leave me? How am I supposed to live now? Mike, call me Dad one more time, Mike.
Their crying seemed exaggerated, as if meant to draw sympathy from the attendees. Yet, I saw it. The moment they exchanged smiles. Were they plotting something? I wanted to confront them right there, but held back. This was a ceremony to say goodbye to Mike. As the funeral neared its end, it was time to read a letter Mike had left.
What? Mike left a letter?
It's Mike's will.
I only found out about it yesterday.
Indeed. The letter had been mailed to and by Mike. And hadn't opened it, saying it was addressed to me. I read the letter immediately upon receiving it, feeling nearly mad with anger.
What does it say?
Don't rush me.
I'm about to share Mike's last thoughts carefully.
Anger trembled in my hands as I held Mike's suicide note. Now, in Mike's place, it's my turn to take revenge on Tom. I resolved to read the letter myself, standing in front of the microphone. The first half of the letter might be tear-inducing, but it contains the evidence of Mike's 23 years of life. Supported by Anne, I took a deep breath and began reading. It started with words of gratitude for Mike's cherished friends, grandparents, mentors, bosses, and colleagues. Then, it moved to express appreciation to his beloved sister and, promising to watch over her. For me, there were words of thanks for giving birth to him, and apologies for causing worry. It's okay for parents to worry. You don't have to apologize. I wished I could go back to that moment and hug him with all my might, recalling Mike's last words. Sobs could be heard from the attendees. At the same time, murmurs of confusion spread. There were no words for his father and wife. and questions arose about the existence of a suicide note after an accidental death. Could it be that Mike? My mother began to voice everyone's suspicions. Perhaps he had taken his own life. Honestly, I didn't know. What a failure of a mother I am for speaking so lightly. Holding back tears, I bit my lip and continued reading the letter.
Dad, thank you for taking care of me for 23 years.
Tom's face, previously scowling at Mike's portrait, suddenly softened. Perhaps wanting to appear as a good father in front of the relatives. But I wasn't buying it.
I heard about you and Linda. I tried to put it behind me since it happened before I knew Linda, but I was shocked to learn it continued.
The attendees, expecting more words of gratitude, began to murmur. As their gaze shifted to Tom and Linda. Linda, sensing something, went pale.
Now I understand why Linda had said she wanted to live with my family during our honeymoon.
Perhaps sweating. Linda clutched her handkerchief and began to tremble.
The large bed Dad gifted us was for Linda and... Please stop! Stop reading the letter!
Linda attempted to snatch the letter from my hands. But her father grabbed her.
Shame on you! I didn't raise you to be like this!
He shouted, holding Linda by the neck as she wailed.
A relationship between me and Linda? Where's the proof? There are plenty of homes where the daughter-in-law and father-in-law go out together.
Tom's denial, whether stubborn or foolish, was loud.
The proof is with me. A friend from my junior college told me about Dad and Linda's affair.
What?
The world is small. It turns out, Dad's frequented restaurant for entertaining was where Linda worked, owned by my friend's family. She even introduced Mike to Linda.
What?
Dad and Linda weren't just eating there, they were kissing.
What? That's ridiculous.
I debated whether to tell Mike. If I knew it would come to this, I wish I hadn't.
And became tearful. Even without Anne's confession, it was only a matter of time before Mike discovered their affair. I resolved to read this part of the letter.
Anne told me, but I had already realized. And don't blame yourself. Could you avenge me in my place? I want this exposed to everyone.
And collapsed upon hearing this.
The worst. Scumbag! Inhuman!
Voices condemning Tom filled the room, and Tom himself slumped to the ground. I continued reading Mike's letter as if delivering the final blow.
I no longer recognize the Dad I knew. I'm grateful for being sent to college, but I cannot call someone who has strayed so far from humanity my parent. The only parent I love is Mom. Dad, Linda, the sin of hurting my dear Mom and aunt is grave. Please leave our home immediately. Mom, I'm sorry for being such a son. I wanted to eat more of your cooking. Mom, I'm sorry. Thank you.
My face was soaked with tears as I finished reading. Mike, my dear Mike. My first child. The gentle big brother. My treasure. Even though he must have been suffering the most, he was still worried about me and Anne.
I will never forgive you both!
I yelled at Tom and Linda with all the strength I could muster. After the funeral, I divorced Tom.
I was just jealous. He was better looking, smarter, and he even married Linda, whom I loved. It's all because of Mike that I...
He kept grumbling, but he went silent after I demanded a hefty compensation. I didn't need such a childish husband. Mike was the one who severed that tie. I kicked Tom out of the house. Big bed included. I didn't need that thing. As for Linda, after she went crying back to her parents,
I disown you,
her father sternly told her. She had no choice but to rent an apartment, too ashamed to step outside. But she'll have to work to live. spending her life in fear of others' judgments. Tom, it seems, was bad-mouthed by his co-workers who attended the funeral and avoided by female employees just for approaching them. Overwhelmed by shame, he resigned. It's his own fault. He should suffer for what he did to Mike. And I started a new life. And came back home, saying it was hard to live alone on a part-time salary.
I want to live with Mom after graduating. Oh, and Mike's here too.
Our living room is adorned with many photos of Mike and Anne. Mike, with his gentle smile, patting Anne's head. 5 years later, Anne got married and continued to live with us. She recently gave birth to a boy.
I'll cherish this child no matter what.
She's fully embraced motherhood.
He smiled. Just like Mike when he was a baby. Yes, their eyes do look similar.
I smiled, looking at Mike's baby photos, and gently stroked the baby's head.
I wish I could see Mike.
I muttered,
Mom, I'll always be with you.
Wiping away tears, I felt as if I heard,